Imagine a world where all of this just stops. What if the secret ingredient, the pinch of invisible dust that powers our entire digital, green, and military future, was controlled by a single rival power? This isn't a what if. It's the world we live in. These are the 17 rare earth elements, and without them, the modern world grinds to a halt. They are the lifeblood of our technology, the foundation of our defense, the engine of our green energy transition. The question is, how did we let this happen? How did one nation execute the most successful and consequential industrial strategy in modern history? How did China conquer the world's most critical resource and build an empire of elements? The story begins not with a bang, but with a prophecy. The year is 1992. The architect of modern China, Deng Xiaoping, is on his pivotal southern tour. It was a journey designed to silence the hardliners and reaffirm China's path of economic reform. But during a stop in the industrial heartland of Inner Mongolia, he uttered a phrase that would set the course for the next 4 decades of industrial warfare. Following the political turmoil of 1989, conservative elements within the Communist Party were pushing to slow down or even reverse the market-oriented reforms that had begun in the late 1970s. Deng, though officially retired from his top leadership positions, used the tour to demonstrate his continued influence and to signal that the policy of reform and opening up was irreversible. His visit to various factories and special economic zones was a powerful piece of political theatre intended to galvanize support for deeper economic liberalization. Visiting a rare earth facility in the city of Baotou, Deng delivered a line that would become the central directive for the state, a mission statement for a generation of planners and engineers. The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. This wasn't just a boast about the nation's geological wealth. It was a clear, top-down command. It was a declaration that China would view these 17 obscure metals not as simple commodities to be sold, but as a source of future global power, a strategic lever to be explored, exploited, and ultimately weaponized. For decades, Chinese scientists and leaders had foreseen the importance of these elements, but Deng's statement crystallized it into a national mission. His successor, Jiang Zemin, would echo this sentiment on a similar visit to Baotou in 1999, declaring that China's task was to change the resource advantage into economic superiority. At the time, this vision seemed audacious, almost absurd. In the early 1990s, the United States was the world's dominant producer of rare earths. China was a minor player, just beginning to ramp up its industry. Deng's prophecy, therefore, wasn't about maintaining a lead. It was about orchestrating a complete hostile takeover. It was the blueprint for an asymmetric strategy. While the West focused on the technologies of today, China would quietly begin a multi-decade campaign to control the foundational elements of tomorrow's technology. The world was about to be outplayed in a game it hadn't even realized had begun. China's grand strategy was built on a foundation of incredible geological luck. The nation was blessed not with one, but 2 distinct and globally significant types of rare earth deposits, giving it a unique advantage over the entire spectrum of these critical materials. In the north, there is the Dragon's Lair, the Bayan Obo mine in Inner Mongolia. Discovered in 1927 as an iron deposit, its rare earth potential wasn't fully realized until decades later. It is the largest rare earth deposit in the world, a polymetallic behemoth primarily mined for iron ore, with rare earths as a hugely valuable byproduct. It is exceptionally rich in what are known as light rare earths, or LREs, like neodymium and praseodymium, the essential ingredients for the powerful permanent magnets that drive electric vehicles and consumer electronics. The Bayan Obo deposit is a geological anomaly, a carbonatite-type deposit containing an estimated 70% of the world's known REE reserves at its peak. This geological structure, combined with the fact that REEs are a byproduct of iron mining, gave the operation a significant and enduring cost advantage. But China's true ace in the hole lies in the south. Here, across provinces like Jiangxi and Guangdong, are the world's only major deposits of ion adsorption clays. These unique geological formations are the planet's primary source of the far more scarce and valuable heavy rare earths, or HREEs. In these deposits, millions of years of weathering have broken down granite, leaving the rare earth elements loosely bonded to clay particles. They can be easily washed out using simple chemical solutions like ammonium sulfate, a process that is low-tech and cheap. These southern clays contain elements like dysprosium and terbium, which are absolutely critical for high-performance magnets that need to function in extreme temperatures, the kind found in missile guidance systems, wind turbines, and advanced military hardware. This dual deposit advantage was a strategic jackpot. Bayan Obo provided the sheer volume for mass-market applications, while the southern clays gave China a chokehold on the high-value, high-tech elements the rest of the world would desperately need. They controlled the board from end to end. Armed with Deng's vision and a geological jackpot, China began its conquest. The strategy was simple, brutal, and devastatingly effective. Weaponize price. Starting in the 1980s, Beijing aggressively propped up its nascent rare earth industry. It offered generous export tax rebates of up to 17% and direct state subsidies, allowing its companies to sell on the global market at artificially low prices. The government also poured funding into research and development through initiatives like Program 863, which aimed to achieve technological breakthroughs and propel the country forward. But the real weapon was a near-total disregard for the environment. While Western producers like the United States faced stringent and costly environmental laws, Chinese operations were allowed to run wild. The immense costs of treating radioactive wastewater, preventing soil contamination and protecting workers were simply externalized, pushed onto the land and the people. This created a hidden subsidy that no responsible Western company could ever hope to match. The result was a flood. Chinese producers inundated the global market with rare earths at prices so low they were often below the actual cost of production for their international competitors. For Western manufacturers, it was an irresistible deal. For Western miners, it was a death sentence. The numbers tell the story of a slaughter. In 1990, China produced just over a quarter of the world's rare earths. By 2008, its share had skyrocketed to over 97%. The world's production had been almost entirely consolidated into one country. And the primary casualty of this economic blitzkrieg was a single mine in the Californian desert. For decades, the global epicenter of rare earths wasn't in China, but in California. The Mountain Pass mine, nestled in the Mojave Desert, was the world's leading producer, supplying the planet with the essential elements for everything from color televisions to military lasers from the 1960s through the 1980s. But it could not withstand the Chinese onslaught. The mine's owner, Unocal, was caught in a vice. On one side, it faced plunging global prices, deliberately suppressed by subsidized Chinese dumping. On the other, it faced mounting costs from environmental compliance, including dealing with leaks of radioactive wastewater from its pipelines. It was an unwinnable war. In 2002, the inevitable happened. Mountain Pass suspended all mining operations. With that single decision, the United States, once the world's leader, officially exited the rare earth mining business, ceding the entire global market to China. The conquest was complete. Looking back, the closure of Mountain Pass wasn't just a business failure. It was a catastrophic failure of strategic vision. In 2002, the event was barely a footnote in the financial press, framed as a simple story of market economics. An American company could no longer compete with a cheaper foreign supplier. The West saw it as efficient outsourcing. It got cheap, critical materials for its booming technology and electronics industries, without having to deal with the dirty, difficult, and environmentally hazardous work of digging them up. But it wasn't just outsourcing a commodity, It was outsourcing a critical national capability. It was handing a strategic rival the keys to the entire technological infrastructure of the 21st century. The West's obsession with short-term economic efficiency had left it blind to China's long-term strategic play. A vulnerability had been created, and it would lie dormant for years, waiting to be exploited. China's victory in the price war secured its dominance, but that victory was paid for with a currency of poisoned water, toxic land, and human suffering. To win the market, Beijing sanctioned the creation of vast national sacrifice zones, entire regions of the country condemned to environmental ruin to fuel the industry's growth. The most infamous of these is the tailings lake of Baotou. Just outside the city, a 10-square-kilometer artificial lake festers, filled with a thick black slurry of chemical waste and radioactive tailings from the nearby rare earth refineries. This toxic cocktail contains heavy metals and, most dangerously, thorium, a radioactive element that leaches into the soil and groundwater, contaminating it for miles around. The dam, built in the 1960s, now holds over 200 million tons of waste, and the toxic seepage has led to devastating health consequences for the local population, including spikes in cancer rates and bone deformities. In the south, the story is just as grim. In the hills of Ganzhou and across Jiangxi province, the supposedly simple method of in situ leaching for ion adsorption clays has created a slow-motion catastrophe. To extract the rare earths, miners inject tons of chemicals like ammonium sulfate directly into the hillsides. This process has poisoned vast stretches of land and water. It has caused severe soil erosion, triggered hundreds of landslides, and contaminated groundwater with ammonia, nitrogen compounds, and heavy metals. The Chinese government itself has estimated that the cost to clean up the environmental damage in Ganzhou alone would be over $5.5 billion. This environmental nightmare wasn't an unforeseen accident. It was an accepted cost of doing business, a core component of the price war strategy. By willingly sacrificing its own land and people, China created an economic advantage built on a foundation of devastation. It was a price the West was neither willing nor able to pay. As China tightened its grip on the official market in the 2000s by introducing export quotas, its strategy almost backfired. The artificially high prices created by the quotas sparked a gold rush, giving rise to a sprawling, lawless black market that threatened to unravel Beijing's carefully laid plans. Thousands of illegal, unregulated mines sprung up, especially in the resource-rich south. Operating in the shadows, these rogue outfits flouted the few environmental rules that existed, causing even more catastrophic damage. They existed completely off the grid, dodging taxes, regulatory fees, and production quotas. This shadow empire became a massive drain on the state. At its peak, it's estimated that a third of all Chinese rare earth exports were smuggled out of the country, with tens of thousands of tons being illegally mined and exported every year. This rampant smuggling undercut the state's own pricing power and made its export quotas almost meaningless. For a time, it seemed the central government had lost control of its own most strategic industry. The Wild West had come to the rare earth empire. Beijing's response to the black market chaos was swift, decisive, and absolute. It launched a massive, state-led campaign, not just to clean up the industry, but to seize total, centralized control. Starting in the late 2000s, the government unleashed a brutal crackdown. Hundreds of illegal mines were shut down, and the entire fragmented, chaotic industry was forcibly consolidated. The thousands of small, independent players were absorbed into a handful of massive, vertically integrated state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, that came to be known as the Big Six. This campaign of control reached its zenith in December 2021. Beijing ordered the merger of several of these giants to form a single, colossal entity, the China Rare Earth Group. This new behemoth was designed with one purpose: to act as the state's command and control center for the global rare earth market, managing production, dictating prices, and executing national strategy with ruthless efficiency. The Great Consolidation was about far more than just economic efficiency or environmental protection. It was the final crucial step in weaponizing the industry. A fragmented market of thousands of rogue miners is impossible to wield as a geopolitical tool, but a single, state-controlled monolith, structured like a national oil company such as Saudi Aramco, is the perfect instrument of power. It allows Beijing to speak with one voice, to manipulate the global market with precision, and to turn the supply of these critical elements on and off like a spigot. The chaotic domestic resource had been forged into a disciplined tool of foreign policy. The stage was now set for the weapon to be used. September 7th, 2010. A minor maritime incident in the disputed waters of the East China Sea becomes the flashpoint that changes everything. After a Chinese fishing trawler collided with Japanese Coast Guard vessels near the Senkaku Islands, known as the Diaoyu in China, the Japanese authorities arrested the trawler's captain. Beijing's retaliation was not military, but economic, and it was devastating. In response, China unofficially but completely halted all shipments of rare earth elements to Japan, the world's most advanced electronics manufacturer at the time. This was the shot heard round the world. For the first time, China had overtly used its rare earth monopoly as a geopolitical weapon. The move sent a wave of panic through global high-tech industries, from Tokyo to Silicon Valley to Berlin. Companies that built the modern world suddenly realized their entire production lines were dependent on a single, hostile source. The abstract threat of dependency had become terrifyingly real. Prices for critical rare earths exploded, in some cases by over 1,000%. The 2010 embargo was the West's Sputnik moment. It was a shocking, undeniable demonstration of a profound strategic vulnerability. The world had finally woken up to the power of China's empire of elements, and the race to build an alternative had begun. For a decade after the 2010 crisis, the world's response was focused on one thing: finding and mining new sources of rare earths. But by the 2020s, China's strategy had evolved. It was no longer enough to just control the raw material. The new goal was to monopolize the intellectual property, the crucial know-how required to turn that raw material into something useful. In December 2023, Beijing played its next card. It officially added technologies for rare earth extraction and, most critically, separation to its list of banned exports. This was followed by a ban on the export of technology to produce high-performance rare earth magnets, like the powerful neodymium iron boron magnets that are the heart of nearly every electric vehicle and wind turbine. The separation of rare earth elements is an incredibly complex and technically challenging process. Because the 17 elements have very similar chemical properties, separating them into high-purity individual elements requires a multi-stage process, often involving hundreds or even thousands of steps of solvent extraction. China has spent decades perfecting these techniques, developing a level of expertise and operational efficiency that the West abandoned and has struggled to replicate. This was a strategic masterstroke. The West could, in theory, spend billions to find and dig up its own rare earth ores. But without the decades of accumulated Chinese expertise in the black art of separation and magnet manufacturing, that ore is nearly worthless. China was no longer just selling the dirt. It was locking down the recipe. It was shifting from a resource monopoly to a much more durable and defensible knowledge monopoly. The result is the world we live in today, in mid-2025. A frantic, high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar race by a coalition of Western nations to build a complete non-Chinese supply chain from the ground up. The key players in this new alliance are emerging. In the United States, MP Materials has resurrected the Mountain Pass mine, and with hundreds of millions in backing from the Department of Defense, is building new processing facilities in California and a magnet factory in Texas. In Australia, Lynas Rare Earths, the world's largest producer outside of China, is expanding its mining operations and building new processing plants, one in Kalgoorlie, Australia, and another, also with DoD funding, on the Gulf Coast of Texas. And they are backed by powerful governments. Japan, having learned the lesson of 2010 the hard way, is aggressively funding overseas projects and research into alternatives. The European Union has enacted its Critical Raw Materials Act, setting ambitious targets to onshore mining, processing, and recycling to break its dependency. This is the new great game. It's an incredibly expensive, technically challenging, and decades-long race against time. The Western Alliance is trying to replicate in 10 years what China built over 40, with the full force of the state and a brutal disregard for costs. The question is, can they do it? But the story of this new Cold War over critical materials is not so simple. For all of China's dominance, wielding the rare earth weapon is a double-edged sword. Some analysts argue the monopoly is a paper tiger. The 2010 Japan embargo, while a shock, was the single greatest catalyst for global diversification efforts. It kick-started investment in non-Chinese mines and research into recycling and substitution, arguably weakening China's long-term leverage. A full-scale sustained export ban would destroy China's reputation as a reliable supplier, accelerating this trend and potentially crippling its own high-tech manufacturing sector, which depends on global markets. On the other side, the path for the West is fraught with risk. This isn't just a matter of political will, it's a battle against brutal economics. Building a new mine-to-magnet supply chain is colossally expensive. A single new mine can take up to 18 years and billions of dollars to develop from discovery to production. The financial challenges are immense. Molycorp's first attempt to revive Mountain Pass after 2008, Project Phoenix, ended in a spectacular 2015 bankruptcy. Despite raising over $1 billion, the project was plagued by technical challenges with unproven technologies, cost overruns, and a collapse in global rare earth prices that China helped orchestrate. The company simply could not compete when China flooded the market again. This history looms large over today's efforts. The West also faces a massive skills gap. Decades of outsourcing have left it with a critical shortage of the engineers and metallurgists who possess the technical expertise for the complex chemistry of rare earth separation. And even if these hurdles are overcome, can Western projects, with their high labor costs and strict environmental standards, ever truly compete on price with China's state-subsidized, environmentally destructive model? The race is on, but the finish line is far from certain. So, how did China build its empire of elements? Through visionary foresight that identified a future dependency the world had overlooked. Through a ruthless price war, fueled by the deliberate sacrifice of its own environment. Through a disciplined evolution, transforming a chaotic domestic industry into a centralized tool of state power. And finally, by securing not just a monopoly on a resource, but a monopoly on the knowledge to use it. It was one of the most successful industrial conquests in modern history. But the conquest sparked an awakening. The world is now fighting back, and the new great game for the elements of the 21st century has begun. The next decade will be decisive. Will the Western Alliance succeed in its frantic, costly race to build a parallel supply chain, breaking the monopoly and securing its own technological sovereignty? Or will China's 40-year head start prove insurmountable, cementing its control over the very elements that will define our future? China played the long game for 4 decades to build its empire. The West has just started to play. Do you think they can catch up in time? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, check out our video on the global semiconductor war.